If you are in a season where nothing seems to be moving where you are praying, staying faithful, doing everything right, and yet it feels like God is silent, I need you to stay with me. Because what may feel like hiddenness is often where God does some of His deepest work. Not everything God is doing in your life will be visible yet. And the Bible shows us a pattern we can see again and again. Before God reveals people in public, He often forms them in private. Joseph did not go from the pit to the palace overnight. Moses did not begin in the wilderness with a burning bush. David was anointed king and then sent back to the field. Elijah saw fire fall from heaven and then collapsed under a tree in exhaustion. If any of that feels familiar, this message is for you. There is a pattern in Scripture that many people only notice once life becomes quiet enough to reveal it. God often prepares before He promotes. He forms before He sends. And He strengthens in hidden seasons before He reveals in public ones. That does not mean hidden seasons are easy, but it does mean they are not meaningless. And the first reason matters more than many people realize. Take David. Samuel anointed him while his brothers stood nearby. The calling was real. The oil was real. The promise was real. But David did not step immediately onto a throne. He went back to the field, back to sheep, back to ordinary work. And that was not because God had forgotten him. It was because David still needed shaping. Sometimes we assume delay means denial. But Scripture often shows us something different. Delay can be protection. The field was not punishment. The field was preparation. God was forming David's courage, humility, patience, and dependence before public responsibility arrived. Because what is given too early can become a burden. But what is prepared in secret can become strength in public. So, if you are in a season that feels unnoticed, do not rush to call it wasted. God may be protecting what He placed inside you. And if David shows us that hiddenness can protect the calling, Joseph shows us something even harder. Sometimes the hidden season does not feel quiet. Sometimes it feels like collapse. Joseph had a dream. God gave it to him. But the road from dream to destiny was painful. His brothers hated him. They stripped him of his robe. They threw him into a pit. Then they sold him into slavery. If you pause Joseph's story right there, it would look finished. It would look like the dream had died. But the pit was not the end of Joseph's story. It was part of his formation. In Egypt, Joseph had to learn how to serve in someone else's house. He had to remain faithful while misunderstood. He had to endure injustice without letting it destroy his character. And that kind of growth is never glamorous. It happens in places nobody applauds. It happens in the middle of disappointment, pressure, and silence. But Joseph kept rising inside the very place that looked like his downfall. And what moves me most is not only that he was promoted later, it is what he became in the process. When Joseph finally saw his brothers again, he wept. The same brothers who had betrayed him. The same brothers who had sold him. And yet he still had tenderness. He still had mercy. He was still whole enough to feel deeply. That is not just survival. That is transformation. So, if your current season feels like a pit, do not assume the story is over. The pit may be shaping you for a future you cannot yet see. If this is speaking to your season right now, stay with me. Because the next story may be the one that helps you understand your own waiting. Moses spent 40 years in the wilderness before God called him at the burning bush. Not in a palace, not on a platform, not in a season that looked impressive. He was tending sheep, and that matters. Because the wilderness teaches things comfort never can. It teaches patience when nothing is moving. It teaches dependence when you have nothing to hold on to. It teaches endurance when nobody is cheering you on. Moses learned how to navigate the wilderness before God called him to lead a nation through it. That is not an accident. God often trains you in the very place that will later become part of your assignment. So if your life feels slow, dry, or hidden right now, that does not mean nothing is happening. It may mean God is teaching your spirit how to carry what is coming next. There is one more story that may be the most tender of all. Elijah had just called down fire from heaven on Mount Carmel. He had seen one of the greatest miracles in the Old Testament. And then, shortly after, he ran. He collapsed under a tree in the wilderness and said, "It is enough, Lord. Take my life." Elijah was exhausted, afraid, overwhelmed, completely depleted. And notice what God did not do. He did not shame him. He did not lecture him. He did not tell him to get over it. Instead, an angel touched him and said, "Arise and eat." Bread, water, provision. God met his physical need first. Then he said, "Arise and eat, because the journey is too great for you." And after that came the still small voice. Not in the earthquake, not in the wind, not in the fire, in the quiet. Sometimes God leads us into quiet, not as punishment, but so we can finally hear him clearly. Sometimes the silence is where healing begins. Here is what ties all of this together. What God builds in secret, he can reveal in public. David was brought from the field to the throne. Joseph was brought from the pit to Pharaoh's court. Moses was brought from the wilderness to confront an empire. Elijah was strengthened in the quiet and sent back out with renewed purpose. In each story, the hidden place became part of the foundation for the public one. Proverbs 18:16 says that a gift makes room and brings a person before great people. In other words, what God develops in you does not stay hidden forever. It becomes part of how he opens doors later. So, if you are in a season of waiting, do not interpret it as abandonment. If you are in a pit, a wilderness, or a quiet place that nobody sees, God has not stopped working. He is often most active in the seasons that feel the most silent. You are not forgotten. You are being formed. If this message spoke to your season, share it with someone who needs the reminder that God has not forgotten them. And if you are comfortable, leave a comment and tell me, are you in the pit, the wilderness, or the season of revealing? If this channel is new to you, subscribe. We go straight to Scripture every week for exactly where you are. New videos every Friday. God bless.